Okay, so here are the best pitching tips I have. What's hard about this is that it's not necessarily, it's very hard to not be nervous pitching, but what I've learned, what I think you should really think about is the more you know the topic you're pitching on, the more confident you will be. The more you've studied it, the more you know the ins and outs of that business or the topic, you're prepared for any questions coming at you. So you're not nervous because you know that when they ask you a question, you know this business like the back of your hand, and you're going to be able to answer them. So the first thing, here's the three things we're going to talk about: nonverbal communication, creating a connection, and the do's and don'ts of pitching. So can someone tell me, nonverbal communication is everything but speaking, okay? So a big percentage of your pitch has to do with your body language. Can someone guess what percent body language plays in pitching? Just shout out an answer.
80.
90,
60,
70,
50. Okay.
20.
Okay. No, those are good answers. Good. So it's 55. So it's over half. Your body language, and there's so many different things to think about body language, but if you are watching somebody else pitch, or let's say you're pitching to someone else and you're looking at people's body language, if you see people kind of slumped over like this, they look bored. It makes you feel a little disrespected, or you're like, they're not paying attention to me, like they don't look into this, right? If you see someone kind of sitting up and constantly nodding at you, that simple body language makes you feel more confident, right? So think about that when you're pitching to someone. What do you want them to do? And then that's kind of what you should be doing as you're pitching as well. So when you're pitching to investors or anybody in general, if your body language shows that you're not confident, then those people who are you're pitching to believe that you're not confident in your business. So if you are kind of slumped over and you're holding the mic and you kind of seem a little nervous, your body language is really closed, then they think that maybe your business isn't as good because you don't feel confident in your business. It's so interesting how that, laps over. You could be saying the most amazing things and the most insightful things, but if your body language shows something different, that's what they see first. So can y'all guess what percentage the tone of your voice plays? That's another nonverbal.
45.
45, okay. Someone else? Anybody? It's hard for me to see the chat, so if anyone wants to shout.
I would say 30%.
30.
Okay.
60.
25.
38, so y'all are pretty close. Very nice. So you guys all know this. When you are getting a text from someone and you can't tell if they're joking or not, right? If you were in person, the tone of the voice really helps. So the tone of your voice when pitching, oh, Abraham, your son is precious. when you're pitching, if the tone of your voice sounds not confident, then they again are going to believe that you don't know what you're talking about. Like if your tone says, we have 30% of retail, that how I just said that sounds like I don't know what I'm saying. So the tone of your voice is also very important and something to keep in mind as you're pitching. Oh, so last but not least, spoken word. The words you're actually saying only account for 7%. So you could be writing this insane speech about what you're going to say, but if your body language and your tone don't match to the words, it won't sell the way it's supposed to sell. So your nonverbal cues are 93% of your pitch. So think about that. So next we're going to talk about body language. I'm not going to ask y'all because we kind of did talk about that a little bit. Here's the main things you should think about with body language when you're pitching. Eye contact. If you are not making eye contact with the judges, it makes you seem nervous. They think, oh, they don't want to look at me, or they're not confident. Again, it all has to do with confidence. If you as a person look confident pitching, they will believe that your business is as confident and doing well as you're saying it is. So eye contact is super important. That's obviously hard in a virtual world, but that's okay. So another part of body language, again, is your posture. Again, like standing, your shoulders should always be back. If you're slumped, That does not look good for pitching. If you're sitting at your computer, again, because in a virtual world now we're really sitting here, as you're sitting, you shouldn't be slumped sitting. You always need to have your shoulders back, confident. And then don't fidget. So this is a hard one. When people are on stage and they're nervous, you can tell they're kind of stepping back and forth with the mic. You like don't want to stand in one place. That's like a nervous tic some people do, and it shows the judges you're nervous. So luckily, again, pitching virtually, that's hard to do, right? You don't get to stand and fidget, but keep that in mind because as you move back and forth, people can tell you're nervous. Second, we have tone of voice. So what you need to think about here is a calm and even tone. You don't want to constantly be moving your voice up and down because then that's like, they're like, whoa, that's a lot going on. But just be positive, be friendly, be confident, and really try not to like, you know, sound like this and then you kind of sound like you're not really sure. So, you know, push that voice out and make it sound like you definitely know what you're talking about. The other part with tone of voice, like, you know, I'm sure you guys have been in fights with your friends or your parents or your significant other. It's not what you say, it's how you say it, right? So if I said, could you go do the dishes, right? That sounds like a nice asking tone. If I said, could you go do the dishes? That sounds like I'm angry. So that tone is very important when you're pitching, especially when you're talking to the judges and you're answering their questions. So really keep that tone in mind. And last but not least is the spoken word. Again, this is your speech. So know what you're talking about. The judges are going to ask you questions. Anytime you pitch and you have judges, there's a Q&A section. When they ask a question, if you're like, I'm not sure, that sounds not so good. So like this third point here, turn negative answers into positive words. A great thing to practice is if a judge asks you a question that you don't know the answer to, instead of saying, I don't have that answer for you, I don't know, you twist it and you say, that's a great question. We're currently looking into that. Thank you. I just said the same thing in two different ways. One of them sounds a lot better. We're currently looking into that. Thank you so much. Versus, I actually don't know. I couldn't find that on the internet, right? Two different things. Try to avoid fillers. We all do it. I say a lot. And you can say like, that just tends to happen. Try your best to avoid that during a pitch. But, and now I'm noticing myself do it and I'm trying not to, but try to really think about that during your pitch. The more you say, it more sounds like you don't know, you know, you're kind of confused, but we all know everyone does it. Just try your best to kind of avoid those. And then humor and relatable content is important. You're pitching to these judges, but remember they're people also. And so you're pitching your business, but, you know, try to connect with them some way. My professor or my boss, who was my professor, who's the head of the Wolff Center, tells everyone, if you can make someone laugh in an interview or at a pitch, you've got them. You made them laugh. There's now a connection there, and they feel more confident with you. So again, y'all are pitching in a virtual world, so it's a little bit different. You're not standing on a stage, you're sitting in front of your computer. So here are things to think about. Most of you are going to be sitting. If you can stand, it's honestly much better. They've got the books stacked up here to make that work. If you can do it, it looks a lot better. If you can't, just make sure that you are sitting up very straight in your seat. Proper lighting is interesting. We all have dark rooms in the house and some lighting looks weird. So make sure that your lighting, like Abraham, I can barely see you right now. Like you're probably not in front of a window, you know? So that's just a good example. If everyone wants to go look at Abraham right now, that's too dark. You can tell he doesn't have the light on in his room, and that's hard for the judges to see your face. So the lighting is very important. And know what's behind you. This is always an awkward one. What if, you know, you have your family walking behind you, that's, you know, distracting, or if you have something on your shelf that shouldn't be seen, you know, be very careful. So having a Zoom background is also really helpful during a pitch. So far, does anyone have any questions regarding pitching virtually?
So I don't have a question, but I just want to say that it's probably because I have my back to the window.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I'm just using you as an example, but that's a good point. Your back to the window creates this darkness. If you're facing the window, if the light's hitting your face, that is what helps it look brighter in the room. So if he turned around, that's a much better lighting effect. Any other questions regarding fees? Nope. Okay, cool. So the next thing is very interesting. Sometimes it's hard to do, but when you're pitching a business, right? You're typically asking for money. You've really got to think of the story behind it. Again, you're pitching to people. You want to create this connection. So I want to try to give you guys an example, and then I'm going to ask some of you to give me an example, okay? So if I'm pitching a standing desk for my home, if I'm pitching this to an investor, like, hey, I need you to invest in my company is a standing desk for people at home. Instead of me just saying, hey, it's a cool standing desk, they haven't been made before, yay, buy it. Like, that's okay, cool. But if I create a connection and I say, people have been working from home for a year due to COVID. We've been laying in our beds on our laptops. We've been sitting in the kitchen with everything going around us. Our backs are hurting from sitting for so long. We now have a standing desk that can help all of this. So you've just created that connection where they're like, oh my God, yes, that's what I've been doing. I've been laying in bed on my laptop. I've been sitting at this desk at my kitchen table that really hurts my back. So they now feel like they get it, they understand it, versus just saying it's a great standing desk. You want to try to connect with who you're speaking to. So now I'm going to ask one of you to give me an example, okay? An Apple Watch. I don't have one, so I don't really know. Can someone tell me, instead of it just being a really cool gadget on your wrist where you can read your texts, can one of you give me an example of how I can connect with somebody about what can this Apple Watch do that's really going to connect with me? Anybody?
I guess I'll go.
Okay.
So I guess whenever you're pitching this, you could talk about how when COVID started, the gyms were closed and a lot of people started working out at the park. And with a watch, and it shows you how many steps you're taking and how many calories you're burning. And that's not something you check on your phone. But if you have your watch, you're going to do it because it's there. So I think that's a good point you could touch on with that.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. And you were talking about fitness, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's perfect. And another thing to think about is it depends who you're pitching to. You can always change your pitch depending on who you're talking to. If I'm talking to people who are really into fitness, that's absolutely the one I'm going to use. But what if I'm talking to like the fast-paced businesswoman who's always on the go and can't check her phone a lot? I'm not going to talk about fitness because the Apple Watch has so many features. I would then say you can check your texts on your phone really quickly with your watch. You can do all these different things for your fast-paced life. So that's another thing to think about for pitching is who are you pitching to and what features and benefits can I speak to for who is in front of me? That's a good one. Okay, I think I have another one I'm going to ask you guys to help me with. Let's see what's next. Okay, shoes made out of plastic water bottles. I found this one from Shark Tank. Anybody want to help me with this one? What kind of emotional pull or connection could I pitch when talking about this?
Well, you could actually just talk about the whole reason we're doing this pitch competition is sustainability. Yeah. And so you think about how many water bottles do you throw into the trash and not even recycle. So now if you, recycle it properly with us, we can even turn it into shoes. And I'm not sure if this is shoes that are meant to be worn by the person or if there's shoes that are being donated to people that don't have shoes. But that's something that you would kind of want to pull on the heartstrings and be like, look, you can recycle and save the earth and you can donate shoes to kids in other countries.
Exactly. No, that's perfect. Because what happens too is when you are so excited about this business you're creating, sometimes you get tunnel vision and you kind of forget kind of these other things you can mention. So if someone was kind of forgetting about the emotional pull, they might say, it's shoes made out of plastic water bottles. No one's ever done it before. This is great. Buy. And I'm like, okay, yeah, but tell me more. Like, I don't know enough about this. So that emotional pull is super helpful. Great job. Now I'm going to show you one more that I'm going to give you an example of. And it's kind of an unsexy one because I want to show you kind of the difference of how you can also do it for one that really doesn't have that big of an emotional pull like the ones we just talked about. So this is an example for that one of our students used in their competition last year. So it's an oil well monitor that sits on the, there, let me let somebody in the room, hold on. There we go. To let somebody, I'm sorry, an oil well monitor that sits on a pipe in an oil well that detects if there's a gas leak, right? And so it, that's unsexy. It's like, how am I supposed to pitch that to someone? Well, you can think about the problem and the benefit. What happens if there is a gas leak? Well, there could be an explosion and your employees could be killed and you could lose all this money and you could be sued. So that's what I would be talking about, right? I would create that story. It's like, oh, this is just a great oil well monitor and it's just cheaper than the competitor. Cool. That's not enough. You have to say ours detects it 4 minutes faster than the leading competitor. That's 4 minutes that you can save the lives of your employees from an explosion happening. So things like that are also those stories should go at the very beginning of your pitch, and it really pulls those judges in to understand what you're talking about before you get into what's, your business model. All right. So last but not least, I have the do's and don'ts of pitching. Here are some do's. Please practice. Always practice. If you wing it, you have so much more area to mess up. Practice, practice, practice. And what's important to think about is if you're pitching by yourself, that's, its own thing. You can memorize your words. But when you're pitching with a team, what's important too, which I should have talked about in the other slide, is when y'all are pitching for your finals, we can see all your faces at once, right? So once you're done pitching and your next person on your team starts, you shouldn't be texting or like sitting like this, because then it shows you're not supporting your teammate, and the judges think, do they not think that they know what they're talking about? So when someone else on your team is pitching, you're sitting up straight and you're nodding and you're agreeing with what they're talking about, and you're supporting them with your body language. So, so, so important. Number 2, look the part, right? You don't want to be in sweats and a t-shirt pitching, because then again, they think you're not serious about what you're doing. Back up your claims with evidence. At the end of a pitch, people always say, hey, you said that 55% of this, blah, blah, blah. Where'd you get that? Know where you got it. And it must be a reliable source. If you say, hey, I just found it on a random Google search on Wikipedia, they're like, okay, that doesn't help me much. So make sure to back up your claims. Oh, there we go. Support your team members with your body language. Again, so important. I've watched teams pitch where once they're done and, they were so nervous, they're done. They're looking at the floor, they're checking, they're looking at their nails, and it just looks like you don't support your team, and it doesn't look good. Know your numbers. They're always going to ask you. I'm not sure how much of the financials y'all are getting into for your pitch, but in general for a pitch, always know your numbers, know what's going on there, because that's how they know that everything you're saying is concrete and has validity. And then know your audience, like I talked about before. Know who's in front of you, because you can change your pitch depending on who you're speaking to. We tell our students there's a bunch of different types of business plan competitions that they can apply to in general during their time at the University of Houston. Some of them have different themes, right? There's a sustainable business plan competition like this one. Then there's one all about oil and gas. So you could take your same business maybe somehow to both, although that was a really bad example. But it's a different type of competition. So you might need to change your pitch deck and change what you're saying depending on the audience. Last but not least, we have our don'ts. Don't argue with a judge. This sounds obvious. Some people don't get that. So a judge may ask a question and say, this really doesn't make sense. I don't understand how you're saying this. Why? How would you claim that? How does your business do that? You need to always respond respectfully. Oh, thank you for that feedback. I totally understand why that may sound confusing. Here's some examples. Does this help you? We've seen people argue with the judges like, no, how did you not understand that? I had that on slide 2. Did you not see it? And then it's like, oh my God, like you have to be careful and you have to respect them. Because sometimes maybe they're just, again, tone of voice. Maybe they're asking it in a way that you're just not used to. So think about that. Think that everyone is your customer. I completely forgot what I was talking about for that point. Don't. Okay, now I remember. Don't think that everyone is your customer. How many of you watch Shark Tank? Raise your hand. Let me just see it. Okay, that's what I was expecting. So, and one of the number one things you'll see on Shark Tank is the thing that they hate is when they say, who's your customer? And they say, the world, anybody who buys Tupperware. No, you have a specific niche of who your customer is. Not everyone who buys Tupperware, the busy mom who's buying Tupperware, or the dad who's blah, 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 right? That specific niche market is super, super important. Don't use filler words, which we talked about, the ums, the likes, the uhs that I've been doing this whole time. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. That's super important. Just like we talked about with tone of voice. And then don't stop the whole presentation if you forget your lines. You should know your business like the back of your hand so that if you forget your written lines, you can carry on because you still know what you're talking about. So don't say, hold on, I forgot. Hold on, let me go back to the beginning. You can pause for a second if you forget. You just wait for a second. We know you're trying to think. And then just keep going, even if it's not exactly what you wrote down on your paper, because you should know your business this well. Last but not least, this quote is something that I think was super helpful that I've always heard in the Wolff Center. People do business with people they like, know, and trust. And that's something to think about with pitching. You're going to want to make them like you, right? Who would want to do business with someone they don't like, right? Be friendly, be open, be confident. They want to get to know you. What's your background? How did you get into this kind of stuff? And they want to trust that what you're saying makes sense. If they're saying that the business is doing this X amount of dollars and we're going to do this next year and it's going to create growth this way, I want to know I trust you that what you're saying makes sense. So that is all I have. Do we have any questions that I can answer? Anything at all? No?
I do want to give a little advice as well. If you're the type of person who, when you hear, like when you mess up and then you're like, because you heard something in the audience, something that always helped me that I learned was to practice pitching with music or a show on in the background. Because if you can practice that with noise in the background, you're less likely to get like distracted and flustered and all of that stuff.
That's a great tip because I got distracted by my dog throwing up this morning. And had I practiced, I would have just shut that out of my ears. Great advice. Anything else before we end for lunch? Nothing else?